Hugh, if I'm going to accept the theistic God of Judeo-Christian tradition, what does it mean to accept that God is free?
Well, many have thought that he was not. Many have thought that since God is perfectly good and all-knowing, that he must choose the best possible world to create. Okay? Now, in my view, there are two things to be said about that. First, since there are no prior plans, there's no choice to be made among possible worlds, because a possible world is just a prior plan. Secondly, though, there's this. The classical view of God's goodness was that it was not dispositional. That is to say, that God didn't tend toward doing good things or have a liking for doing good things or anything like that. God was supposed to be perfectly in act or purely in act. And what that would mean would be this, that God's goodness depends entirely and is entirely a matter of what he does, not what he's disposed to do, because he doesn't have any dispositions, right? So that the goodness of God then lies entirely in his deeds. So we talk about the goodness of God, and let's say this is the best of all worlds. Okay, the goodness of God in creating the best of all worlds lies simply in his creating the best of all worlds. It's not a motive that led him to do so.
Because there's no such thing as ultimate good that God has to conform to?
No, it has nothing to do with that. It might be ultimate good, but he doesn't have to conform to anything. If there's an ultimate good, it's because he creates it.
Okay, but he's not bound by it.
Not bound by anything.
Not bound by anything. And that's what makes God free. So your concept of God is freer than traditional concepts?
No, I don't know if it's freer than traditional concepts. It depends. There are so many traditional concepts. But it does not involve God having anything happen to him, right? And that means that among the things that don't happen to him is he looks at a possible world and says, well, that one would be nice.
And judging one to the other, comparing one to the other. Doesn't do that.
Well, yeah, right. He's not... He's not impressed by anything.
Yeah.
Okay. That is, he loves things and so forth, but it's a completely active thing. It's not a passive thing.
So the world that comes out of God, did God have to create this world?
No.
Didn't have to create. Didn't have to create any world.
Well, to me, it's wrong to make any modal statements about God. So it is not the case that he had to create the world. It's not the case that he could have created another. He simply created the world, or creates the world.
And that, your problem with so-called modality, necessity, contingency,
Right.
different options, your problem with that is one of a human knowledge or one of a statement about God's essence?
No, I would say the same thing about us. We say that Socrates is essentially a man, and I would agree, but I would not then go on to say that Socrates is necessarily a man, right? It's not, look, it's enough for God to make Socrates a man. He doesn't have to force him to be one, right? So it's not the case that Socrates is necessarily a man, and that doesn't mean he could have been a frog. Because if no modal statements are true here, then just as it was not necessary that Socrates be a man, so also it's false that he could have been a frog. He simply is what he is. And that's the way it is with God.
So God chose this universe, and that was, he could have done otherwise. He could have chose no universe, or he could have. The options are God could have no creation. God could have created this universe, and God could have created other universes. There's no other possibility in those three.
There is a fourth option.
Okay,
the fourth option is that there are no could-haves where God is concerned. He simply is what he is and does what he does.
Well, then that's the option that God created this universe without any other possibility.
There were no possibilities to speak of before the universe.
That sounds like God is totally constrained. If there's no possibility, God
He's
had to do this.
totally unconstrained.
God is totally constrained. You have you have a God that's totally constrained.
No.
There's no freedom whatsoever.
No. If there were possibilities, he would be constrained because he would be confined within those possibilities. If there are no possibilities, then there's no constraint.
No possibilities, then there's no choice. Don't you need choice to have freedom?
There's not a choice among options. There is the freedom of the Creator, right? Who is not a deliberator, right? He's not engineering anything.
Freedom means choice.
No, freedom simply means act, right? It means action, okay? And action is free provided it is not hemmed in.
Okay.
By prior conditions. Okay. And in God's case, it's not hemmed in even by prior conceptual conditions.
So God can be free with totally no choices.
With totally no modal statements true about him. Okay. With no could with no cans and coulds, right? He's free in the sense that he transcends even the possible.